we are ready.
Yep.
And we got time? All right. Good morning, everyone. We got a pretty good turnout today. All right, well, let's get started. We've got a lot to cover. Can you all hear me okay?
Yeah, we got you, Amir.
Great, thank you. So, couple of quick updates. Dan, do you have anything that you want to add?
No, I think we can just dive right in.
Okay. Couple of quick updates, just so that the group is aware. The Tule Subbasin did have a meeting with the State Water Resources Control Board staff, and there were some very good things that came out of the meeting, and there was at least one item that was a little bit bothersome. Morning, everybody. Good morning, Jay.
Morning, how are you?
Good, you?
Good.
Good. So the good news that came out is that the state board did give a positive feedback on Tule's subsidence numbers, which is 6 feet in some cases. And the other thing that we liked was the fact they are now talking about that 6 feet as the total amount of subsidence that we can allow between now and 2040, as opposed to also including the residual value in there. So they understand that there may be residual value that occurs after the 2040 deadline. That's very different than what they had been saying previously, and that's huge. So, you know, in some cases, in the Tule Subbasin, we were talking about 2.3 feet of residual that we were anticipating, and this allows us to say, okay, look, that can occur afterwards. So that was a little bit, I think, on the positive side. I'm not going to go through the whole meeting with you guys, but the other item that came out of that was not so positive was the fact that they started talking about preparing some criteria for implementation. And when we asked them to clarify that question and what they meant by that, this was at the very end of the meeting, it became clear that what the state board appears to be doing is preparing a list of criteria that you have to meet in order to get out of probation. So previously we all thought, get your GSP done, and then you get turned back over to DWR. And that DWR would be responsible for our implementation. The bothersome part was it now sounds like they're thinking that you get your GSP done, and then we want to see how well you implement this thing, or whatever criteria we have for your implementation, and then you get out of probation. So it very much felt like the goalposts moved. Dan and I had a meeting with some of the GSA managers in the Tule Subbasin yesterday. Eric Lemus at Pixley and Lower Tule, he kind of felt like that's what they had been telling him from back in January, but the rest of us were not part of those conversations. So it came as a surprise to us. I think it maybe came as a little bit less of a surprise to Eric, but still, I don't view that as a positive thing. And we haven't seen the criteria. We don't know what it's going to say. This is purely very limited information that we have right now, but we'll definitely keep you all informed on what comes out of that conversations with State Board.
And I'll add to that, and I think we've discussed this before, but at the State Board hearing, they directed staff to review Eric Lemus's subsidence management plan and his allocation program. They have done that. They've given Eric positive feedback. They haven't asked for any changes to his subsidence management plan. And so they feel confident that they've met the bar with the subsidence management plan, which is very similar to what we're looking at today. And on the criteria, which Amir just spoke about, this was a surprise to at least the rest of us, that we're now going to be how long they're going to watch our implementation before they let us out. I do not know. But I know they are working with Eric Lemus. They have sent him some criteria that they are interested in looking at, and Eric Lemus has sent them criteria back. And so they're working with Eric to design what criteria they're gonna look at during the implementation period. So it's kind of a black box for the rest of us right now, but I would suspect we'll have more clarity fairly soon.
So back to the subsidence thing, it's gonna be an average for the tri-counties, or we're gonna get in this patchwork thing?
No, we're still gonna do the patchwork, Jay, but at least, I think the big thing was about the residual. So the residual would not be subtracted off of our values that you see off the MT values. We had been
So
pushing
how would
back.
they ever know that number until 2040 post, what the number's gonna be?
Yeah, they would have, previously, they made it sound like you have to estimate what that residual was gonna be and built that into your value.
Okay,
And we, Deanna and I in particular, had pushed back quite a bit on that. We never
Right.
felt like that was the right way, and that the way Sigma is written, our responsibility is to minimize and stop subsidence at 2040. And whatever residual that may occur 20, 40, 60 years in the future is the residual that occurs, as long as we control subsidence between now and 2040. And we all understand that, you know, there may be years where, drought years in particular, that, you know, past 2040, but, you know, at that point, we should be pumping at a sustainable value.
that's the
Or close.
definition of sustainable.
Right.
No more subsidence.
Yeah. So we wanna, we wanna minimize subsidence past 2040, you know, to the, and sort of limit any damage to infrastructure past 2040.
You know, Mayor, as I was thinking about this, because I saw what's happening in Westlands, you know, they actually had a couple good years, so they actually had some ground go up,
Yep,
right?
they did.
And I thought, we were so focused on getting the plans approved, that we even thought about, after all this was done, going back and saying, hey, let's go back and look at how much can we pull from the deeper aquifer. In other words, we're so focused on cutting off all extractions below, right?
Right,
At some point, it's gonna equal out, and we're gonna, you know, so I want us to think about that there is a new day down the road, that we're gonna say, hey, this isn't a policy that's gonna prohibit lower aquifer extractions forever. There might be a day where we can come back and say, hey, there might be some room to continue to pump. Some amount, right? Some amount.
so Steve, this policy does not say zero pumping below the clay after 2040. Just want to be clear, it doesn't say that.
Right, I'm just
Yeah.
saying, I know we're so focused on limiting, we're,
Yeah.
adaptive management, I guess that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, very much adaptive management. I had this conversation literally yesterday with the Mid-Kings folks that, let's say we get closer to 2040 and we're not seeing the impacts, then maybe we need to revise the policy appropriately, right?
Yeah.
That's what you mean by the adaptive.
Right, so we could get into with some of these 50% triggers we hit, and we pull back on our map of the extraction below the clay,
Mhm.
and it subsides flatline.
Right.
We might just stay at that 50% trigger for 10 years,
Right.
right?
Right. We're gonna show you guys later in this meeting the annual report values so that you can look at, what happened over the last, 12 months, or the last water year, I should say.
Yes.
And one of the things that we're gonna talk about is when you look at water levels for the last 12 months and the amount of subsidence. So we'll be looking at some of those, and I think it actually has the previous year in there as well.
So you're saying it's kind of correlated between the water levels going,
Yeah.
correlation between the levels dropping.
Yeah, if you can keep the water levels above a certain level, they clearly show that the subsidence is minimal at that point.
Okay.
Yeah. So, it also, obviously, it's obviously related to the amount you extract to the water level, of course,
Yeah.
right? Okay. Stacy, why don't we go ahead and jump into our presentation?
Why don't we let Kathy give a two-week
yeah.
trust update real quick?
Oh, sorry,
So that- in case
Kathy.
she needs to hop off.
Okay.
Kathy?
Yeah.
She's was muted. So she's the iPhone 16.
Up, here we go.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Hey, yeah, I'm on a new iPhone. Just a little update on the trust. Susan has left the trust and I have stepped in as an interim project director. So a couple of updates for this upcoming week. We are going to have the MLRP Ag Advisory Meeting, which is at Pixley ID in Tipton on Wednesday, the 26th at 2:00. So we're going to be going through the MLRP core plan. I think they're going to talk a little bit about your Tri-County local plan, but we need the feedback from the landowners, the ag people, on how you would like to look at multi-purpose multi-benefit land repurposing. And I know for Tri-County, land fallowing is really important to you. So I think that is going to be one of the topics. But Abby Hart from the Nature Conservancy is going to be presenting along with Allison from the Pixley Irrigation District, GSA. So that's the one thing that's coming up. And then for the trust, I am pushing for a land a land fallowing program for next year. I'm not sure if they're going to fund it. So as that unfolds, I may be coming to you to Tri-County for some support for that, to continue funding that program. I think it's really beneficial as we look at transitional water and moving forward with Sigma implementation. In the meantime, I'm hoping to only be in this position for a couple of months. We will be searching for an executive director. So that's kind of all I have right now. If anybody has any questions.
Thank you, Kathy. Max, if you can unmute yourself for just a second. So Max Dugan obviously works for Geosyntec. I think some of you know him. We have the draft of the local plan done, and that is something that we're going to be sharing with this group at our next meeting. Obviously, we have some other priorities right now that we want to get to. So Max got the document done. Max, I don't know if you want to give anybody a quick update on that, just a 30,000 overview.
Sure. Thanks, Amir. You hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. So yeah, as Amir said, we have our draft plan done. It just covers Tri-County Water Authority, and it really provides the basic background, some of the current kind of ag setting, and frames kind of the overall potential need for land repurposing within Tri-County area. It also provides some helpful summaries of different strategies, additional information, technical resources, links, and then includes some estimates of, what's the total, potential funding need to implement some of these practices. So the idea is it helps give, landowners information that will be useful for them, for actually identifying opportunities and, considering trade-offs and implementing projects. It gives Tri-County and, other funding groups an idea of the scale of potential repurposing and funding needs so that they can go after additional, grant funding. And then it identifies some opportunity zones where certain projects are maybe more likely to attract outside funding and be successful for repurposing.
Great. Thank you, Max. I was trying to see if anybody had any questions. I'm going to go ahead and keep moving on just because we've got a lot to cover, and we'll be sharing the draft document with everybody at our next meeting.
For today, should we do a little bit of the annual report before we?
You want to do the annual report first?
Yeah.
Let me switch.
Sorry, Stacy.
When will that be filed, the annual report?
April first.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're basically got it done.
This is,
This is for Thule, so this is Tom Harder's group.
Okay, so Tom's got it done.
Tom's got it done. There were lots of comments, that we gave, and I think others have subsequently have given some comments.
Okay.
so this is draft, there will likely be a few changes to it, but some of the, I thought some of the, attachments and table, or the, mapping was important to look at today, so, where the contours are and that type of thing.
This is the presentation that Tom shared with the Thule Subbasin GSA managers yesterday, so this is his presentation. So I'm not gonna go through every slide, but I do wanna go through, go ahead, Stacy. So just quickly, you can see that the 23-24 water year was an average year. It almost hit that average dead on, which is pretty rare if you look back in that time frame that we're talking about, and you can see obviously that the 22-23 year was much higher. Okay, moving on. So this is the upper aquifer groundwater levels in spring of 24. You can see where some of the pumping is occurring. You can see where water levels are changing over the course of the subbasin. One thing that keeps jumping out at us, and I've made this comment several times, there's some pretty big chunks of both Lower Thule and Pixley that don't have any monitoring points in them. Obviously, you can see where Angela's well field is, out to the, I guess it would be, to the west there, near 43. And then, a lot of that data is provided, but there's not much surrounding it. So we did raise some concerns about the contouring, and we drew up some new contours that we think are a little bit more realistic. So
What about Tri-County in the southeast area there too, east of 43, we not have any more wells out there with monitoring?
yeah,
East of 43?
we don't have any in the upper aquifer. We just don't have that many wells in the upper aquifer, Steve, in that
No, it makes
southeast area.
sense. I was just,
Yeah.
I know there's a few,
Yes,
Yeah.
we definitely could use some more monitoring sites. That's something that we've raised for the whole subbasin.
there's
Yeah.
one along Howard Road,
Necessary.
you'll have a few along Howard.
And we actually do call that out in the revised GSP that we need some more, and we've identified some in the revised
Got it,
GSP. What was I gonna add? This is the upper aquifer, let's see. Okay, Stacy, let's go on to the next one. So this is the fall of 24. So the previous one was spring, and this is now the fall of 24, in the upper aquifer. Not too much change. Obviously, the water levels are lower in the fall, which is not surprising. Again, we had some comments on the contouring that we've provided to Tom's group. I'm going to keep going through this fairly quick. This is a change in storage. You can see in the upper aquifer, what is that number? 350,000? Come on, look at this. Yes, 354,000.
Yes,
Yes.
354.
Yeah, as a positive change in storage. This map clearly shows that the one area that has a negative change in storage in the upper aquifer is the western side there near the Angela Wellfield. It's part of Pixley and Tri-County in that area. We are going to be working a little bit closer with Angela and making sure that there's a standard operating procedure for collecting water levels in the future. They've been doing their own. We want to make sure that the water and the data that they've been providing is consistent with what methodology the rest of the subbasin is using. And that's even, you know, this year in particular made it very clear that, we need to make sure that data is collected in the same method. Okay, let's keep moving. There's some groundwater elevation changes. I'm gonna go ahead. Let's keep moving. These are all in surrounding, oh, sorry, I'm sorry. Could you go back just a second? Yeah. So this one, is a monitoring well that was installed using PWR funds in Tri-County. And what I do want to point out very much is that you can see that, and this is a continuous reading over that time period because there's a transducer in there. What you can see is that, you know, for that time frame, we stayed above the MT elevation that we have for that well, for the water level. And you'll see in a few slides that also meant that we had very little subsidence in that area, almost none in that area. So that gets back to the point that I was making earlier about if you can maintain the water levels above those MTs, we can start to see fairly minimal subsidence. Okay. This is the lower aquifer. And again, this is, well, I know what I was going to say from the last slide, just so you guys are aware. The dots in blue are the representative monitoring locations, and you can see that they're scattered across, but few and far between. The dots in the yellow are wells that we don't have well construction details on, but we have water levels. And Tom's group has said, look, if we think water levels at these elevations must mean that these are either upper or lower aquifer wells, but they don't actually have well construction. And those wells are used to draw these contours. So, you know, Deanna and I made a comment yesterday that to the rest of the subbasin that you guys got to get your wells registered, and you got to understand, you know, where these actual construction of these wells are, so that we have the information that we need, and we can draw these contours with a certain level of comfort and certainty that, you know, is not there right now. If you're using wells that you don't have well construction on, it becomes problematic. And we're using these to draw contours across the entire subbasin, and there's a lot of yellow dots on that screen.
Did Angela pump much?
What was 11,000
in 24?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, a lot of lines right there.
It's a lot of lines, Steve, because they provide a lot of data,
Right.
and nobody else does. So you can. So
I hear you.
yeah, we actually recommended to Tom to take all those out and draw much.
Might be purposeful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, you never know.
All right. So that's the spring.
Spring is day.
Yep. We'll keep moving. Fall numbers. Similar. You know, remember last year would have been an average year fall that followed a extremely wet year. So those reservoirs were full. A lot of people received either full or very close to their full allotments of surface water. All right, Stacey, we'll keep moving. Keep going. Keep going. Skip this, that, next, skip, no, this,
Nope, you like that one?
yeah, this one.
Okay.
So, INSAR data. So here's the INSAR data for subsidence for that water year. In addition to this INSAR data, what's not shown on here is they also take surveyed benchmarks of locations across that area as well. And keep in mind that these guys, you know, you use the INSAR data, you do averages across big areas and you know, if it's between, 2.5 and 5.0, it doesn't take a lot of data points. Just doesn't mean that you're at half a foot of subsidence, okay? I want to be clear. The benchmark showed us much closer to like 0.26, for example, in that light blue area. And it gets painted with this light blue that makes it look a lot worse than it really is. And that's one of the reasons that it's critical to have this benchmark data as well. There was benchmark data on the west side of Delano Early Mart that was higher than any benchmark reading in Tri-County for that year.
Say that one more time?
I mean, more subsidence.
So what's happening?
Yeah, there were benchmarks that are located on the west side,
Within
within Delano Early Mart, on the west side of Delano Early Mart,
Okay.
that have higher subsidence than any of the values in the benchmarks that were in Tri-County.
Oh, okay.
Okay? And there were two of them that were on that west side, and they were both higher than anything that we saw in Tri-County. And one of our benchmarks is right on that border. And that showed a lower subsidence than within Delano Early.
You know, Mayor, let me ask you a question too. I noticed that in the Alpha area, I see where the green is at.
Yeah.
Isn't that where their well fill is at as
Yes.
well?
Yes.
For pumping, because they are claiming that they are sustainable, but that is kind of a little bit of doubt.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is the first time we've seen that, but they did, my understanding, drill 10 new high-capacity wells, so.
Yeah, that's a
You
problem.
know how many they drilled?
That's a
There's
problem
quite a
even
few.
for Tri-County.
I have the Alpha.
Orders. We don't, there's no farming in Tri-County up against Alpha on that northern portion of Tri-County.
No, there's not.
That's all high-speed rail, habitat ground.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
So-
they couldn't point a finger over to the Tri-County GSA area.
No.
Not that,
No,
no.
it's kind of the opposite, Steve. We think that light blue that's right up against there.
No, I don't want to talk about Alpha. I just thought
Yeah.
let's move on to Tri-County.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is what subsidence for that last year, looks like. All right. I think it's good. So this is the change, yeah, as I said, the 22-23, which was an extremely wet year. And then versus 23-24, where some of the wells, started to turn back on. Not necessarily all of them. Obviously, like I said, there was a lot of surface water deliveries in 23-24. But you can see some fairly consistent, for the most part, across much of Tri-County, which is exactly what we would have expected, right? Tri-County's pumping is in the southeast area. It doesn't change that much, whether it's wet or dry, since we're groundwater only. It does, obviously does, but not tremendously. And then in the north, our pumping does change depending on how much surface water we're able to get in those areas.
But in the olive blue, what is that rate?
The dark blue is 0 to 0.25, and the light blue is 0.25 to 0.5 feet for that year.
So the darker the color, the less the subsidence.
Yes,
Correct.
yes.
For the best area was up at Porterville, Porterville has stable ground, no ground movement up on.
Yeah, I mean, again, Steve, surface water deliveries like we talked
Yeah,
about,
no,
and even some uplift in the southern portion of,
Delano.
surprising.
Even in current Tulare water, there's
Yeah,
Yeah, what does the beige represent?
areas with no readings for, a variety of different reasons. And frankly, it's a little bit surprising how much there is across this subbasin. We find that in Tulare Lake, right at the lake bottom, because they have a hard time, calibrating the sensors on the satellite in an area with very little, infrastructure. But this, across this subbasin, I'm surprised at the amount of, beige areas. Okay, let's keep moving. I think that's change in storage. I'm gonna keep, cumulative land subsidence between January 2020, September 24. So for the southeast area, we're gonna talk about this in more detail, and in fact, we have a map that we already sent out to you, that was the little grid map that you've all seen in your package that came, and those of you in the room, there's actually handouts for everybody. We're gonna talk specifically about what those values are for Tri-County, and you can see those in more detail. But this kind of gives you an idea of where subsidence is occurring across the subbasin and the areas that continue to see some of the highest subsidence. Okay, I think that should be the last slide. Oh, there's, quickly, some map or some tables that show cumulative pumping, groundwater, pumping as a whole, and urban, pumping. So you can see for Tri-County, we are at 71,000, roughly 11,000 in the north, and 60,000 or so in the south.
Does that have acreages for each area described? Is there like a gross acreage
Not
divided by the total pumping?
no.
So it's
Yeah.
1 foot per gross acre or 2?
We can certainly
I'd
do
like
that.
to see that.
Yeah, we can certainly do that, Jay, but we don't. This document doesn't have it.
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
the PowerPoint that Tom provided?
To the GSA managers yesterday.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is this something we could have access to as well, or?
Because it's still in draft.
So this is the report summary, so the
Yes.
report, will this all be in the?
Yes.
in
Yes,
the
it'll
report?
be in the
Will
re- yeah.
released next week? That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, this is surface water supply, and you can see that we're looking at what? Well, they count precipitation as surface water supply. That's debatable, but they are.
I was wondering what you were gonna say. I was watching that word of yours, you said debatable. Good.
That, yeah,
One more question.
good, Jay.
For like 23, all that flood water in the preserve area,
Yes.
does that get accounted for?
In the preserve area,
So-
Ecological preserve, probably.
What is there, 5,000-6,000 acres out there? I mean, that thing had water on it for, I'm like, 60 to 90 days.
we did include some flooding in ours, so our numbers for surface water were quite a bit higher last year, and so were everybody else's, obviously.
Right.
But we really try to show a fairly high recharge number for last year.
For 24?
For 23, for 23,
23.
yeah, for 23, yeah.
So
It
is
goes
this,
in the report.
I don't see a year on this. Is this
This is-
23 or 4?
This is from,
It would be from October 1st, 2023 through September 30th, 2024.
24.
yeah, it's a water year.
So the flood year was the year before.
Yes, yes.
And do you have those numbers as well?
Well, we have them, I don't have a slide for
They're
them.
in last
Right.
year's annual report.
So that's my question, is how much water got sunk
Last year, or the flood year.
the flood year?
Yeah,
I mean, it's gotta be tremendous.
it was. Yeah, it was a lot of water. And that's why you see those subsidence numbers the way you do. is
Yes.
Because there was very little pumping, because everybody was thinking, you're using surface water, was thinking it.
Okay.
Okay, next slide. All right, so this is total water use, groundwater extraction, surface water supplies, any other, water source, and this is the total amount of water used by the sub-basin, for all purposes, including, urban and ag, and roughly where those, uses occurred as well. All right. If we're good, I'm gonna keep moving. Oh, well, still, change in storage, this is the cumulative change in storage, is that chart off to the right. And you can see that the number, as a trend line has gone down, since, what is that, 87? But, it has jumped up over the last couple of years. So if you were to look, I don't know how easy it is for you guys to see this, but roughly if you were to look at 2014, 2015, and where we are today, you would see that we are about the same level of cumulative, of the change in storage. So I basically said, I guess we're done, we're sustainable, and let's, why are we wasting time? Let's get out of here. That didn't quite fly, but hey,
We tried.
we tried. So yeah, that gives you a feel for what has happened since 2015. And certainly going all the way back to the 87 year. All right, next slide. Hopefully that's the last one.
Yeah.
All right, that's the last one. All right. Again, the annual report will be available as a final by April 1st. Okay, let's start our prep. Keep going. I'm going to skip. We already talked about Fleur Lake and Thule updates. Yep, there we go. Okay, now this is the key part for today. The groundwater extraction allocation policy, it's been out for a couple weeks for review. Where we're at is just some quick updates. Many of you have already seen this, but I'm going to give everybody just a quick update. We are switching from ET to meters. We have started our well registration. It's going well. Once we'll have well location, well construction information, and we'll have an area for people to report their meter readings. And we are moving away from ET. Obviously, we'll still be using ET to as a check on places where we need to, but the idea is to report your meter data, and we don't. In that case, since we're not using the ET by itself anymore, only ET, we don't care about precip, we don't care about surface water deliveries, we're just looking at how much groundwater is being extracted. Eligibility for native yield and transitional pumping, there's no change in that. If you've been previously eligible, you are eligible today. And then our approach is our allocations now are based on pumping targets, which we're going to see in the next annual pumping targets that we're going to see in the next slide. And those pumping targets are limited by the values in the Thule Coordination Agreement. All right. Yep. I know it's a lot of information in a really small. You just look at the last three columns, you'll see that there's the amount of pumping that's going to be allowed, and our native yield value is 12,000 acre-feet per year. That doesn't change. This next column is the transitional. That reduces every year. And then we get down to a total of 18,000 from roughly starting at about 58. The number does include 6,000 acre feet a year for the Angola Water District. So 12,000 native yield, and 6,000 for Angola, and that adds up to the 18,000 that is our target value for sustainably pumping out, extractions. All right. I know you've all seen this. I'm just trying to reiterate and make sure everybody understands exactly what's in the document. Here's our values over the next 5 years, starting in 26 through 2030. And, again, our native yield is 0.22 in the Tule subbasin. You'll see the next column on the far right is the transitional values. They start at 1.6 and reduce down to 1.0. And then our total allocation is going to be 1.82, dropping down to 1.22. And then separate from that is going to be the Angola value of 6,000. That's the value at the end. So we get our total and our like I said, dropping from 1.82 to about 1.22. That's acre feet per acre, of course. Okay, keep moving on. For the accounting, as I've mentioned already, the native yield is 0.22. Transitional pumping reduces from roughly 1.6 to 1.05, and that gives us roughly 7.48 acre feet over the 5 years. Just to be clear, that 7.48 is your total pumping, not just transitional. I put it under the transitional bullet there, but I want to be clear that that's 7.48 acre feet over 5 years. Any landowner developed credits are in accordance with a recharge policy. And this is very important. The credit is to the zone being recharged. It does expire on a 5-year rolling average. So year 1 rolls off on year 6, but you keep years 2 through 4 or 5, I guess.
What's the thoughts on that? Where does it go? Why would it expire?
So water moves, right, Jay? So you put water in the ground, it's moving. We're giving you credit for that, but basically saying, look, you can pump water you put in 25 in 2030 or 2031. Excuse me. You can still pump it in 2030, but in 2031 is not realistic. That water is moved and it's been removed from the ground.
But it'd still be your credit.
I think the problem would be,
So if it moves, you lose ownership?
it's not
I
there.
mean, you could argue that with DEID then.
Yes.
I agree.
Yes, you
Right?
certainly could. Yes.
It's not there, and then realistically, if you were to draw from that 6 years later or so, it would, and you had extra credits that weren't under the ground, it would
Sure.
cause the undesirable results that we're trying to not have happen.
So if you bought it or got a credit in, say, the 24 year, when would it expire? It would expire,
So I'll make it easy because we're going to start in 25.
Yeah.
Say you got a credit in 25, it rolls off your account in 2031.
in 31.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have it for the full 5 years, and then in 31, only your 24 credit rolls off, but all your other credits would stay in any other credit you got. Now let's
On a
say,
yearly basis.
yeah.
Right.
So Jay, let's use the obvious example. If you buy Steve's 27 credit,
Okay.
right? Since that was in 27, it's still good for those 5 years after that.
After that.
Yeah.
And that does not account for native yield. This
It does
is-
not account for native yield.
That's good forever.
That's good forever. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, let's keep moving here.
Amir, I had a question on that previous slide
Oh,
about
yeah.
about that 7.48. Is there any flexibility in receiving that kind of like chunk of water as a block allocation as opposed to getting it as an annual allocation.
So we've talked about that, Nicole, and the feeling right now is in order to show reduction in groundwater pumping, moving towards sustainable values, we are not looking at doing things on a transition or on a 5-year block anymore, but rather on a year-to-year basis. I know that, you know, the obvious questions that people have are like, if there's a wet year, you're not pumping some, maybe all of your transition that year. Do you lose it? And unfortunately, right now, you know, the way we're writing the policy is you do lose it. Now, you don't lose your native yield ever, because, you know, that's still native yield. But we don't want to, we're not looking at doing things on a 5-year basis anymore, especially now and it's reinforced by the state talking about these implementation criteria. We want to be able to show them that we are actually reducing pumping towards sustainable values on a year-to-year basis. Now, if we have go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, is there an ability to do a shorter term block, like a 2 or 3 year block? Obviously we don't want to pump more than that amount of water, like more than the allocation, but I think, something that's top of mind is the flexibility to be able to transition. And yeah, even if not a 5-year block, I think even a 2-year block could help, something shorter.
I'm looking at Deanna, you probably can't see me. Nicole, sorry, I realize you have this up on the screen.
Yeah, I mean, we've looked at this quite a bit, and at this point, I think it's gonna be a 1-year allocation. Now, the transitional doesn't roll off after 1 year, though.
The transitional doesn't roll off.
Like if they weren't to use, I thought the transitional rolled, it doesn't roll at all. So if there's a wet year, the transitional comes off?
Yeah.
It is just not, that's why.
I think there might be some flexibility in that. I mean, like it's not forever, but a little flexibility in.
So if we kept transitional for a shorter time frame, like a 3-year rolling average or
something like that.
Something like that.
Yes.
It would mitigate for drought.
It would
I mean,
help.
we can't control that.
There should be
Right.
some flexibility in extremely wet years, I would think.
Yeah, that's why I made the comment to you guys,
The 3.4.
on the 3, too, with such, struck me, we were going such a quick ramp down. It would be nice to have with a little bit of a flexibility the next, I'll just say the next 5 years. After that, everybody's gonna be fallowed anyway. Who cares? That's we can pump it. If you have extra water, you'd be able to pump, keep the cap like it was previously with 3.4. Is, by 2030, it'll be moot. No one's gonna really have any water to pump.
Yeah, so hold that thought for a second.
That's all I was following along with.
Yeah, hold that thought, Steve.
Flexibility.
I wanna finish answering Nicole's question. So what we're talking about is the ability to roll over some of the transitional water, and could we do it for a 2, 3, 5-year rolling, not rolling average, but rolling block there.
Most years, and just most years in the southeast area, it's gonna get used.
Yeah.
But if there's an extremely wet year, to have that carry over, I think makes some sense, so.
Yeah.
Especially if you're gonna foul part of your ground, if you're gonna try to shrink back down, keep some of it going.
Yeah.
Flexibility, we're just asking for flexibility.
There has to be an end date to it, the transitional can't
No, I
go on
understand,
forever,
but I
but
think
I'm
a little,
thinking some sort of
A little more flexibility.
3-year
Right.
rolling or
Yeah.
something like that would make sense.
Yeah, I agree. I was trying to think about the best way to word it. And I'm thinking, this is me talking out loud, Nicole, so don't, or anybody on the call, so just, keep that in mind.
there's not any board members.
We won't put you on it.
That's who I most care about, is board members.
Yeah, so
I think that makes it.
I'm wondering, since we're talking 7.48 acre feet, I'm wondering if you can, continue or roll your transitional pumping within that 5-year.
And then it goes off the book
Yeah.
again.
Now, so just to be clear, I'm not saying we start with 7.48, but, you could, if you don't use your transitional within that 5-year period, it doesn't go away, and it will accumulate, and you can use it in future years within that 5-year time period.
So we would get the annual deposit on that ramp down that you just showed us.
Yes,
But if you don't use that,
it would carry over.
you might, you use 0.2 foot if you didn't use it, that 0.2 foot would roll over into
Yeah.
277.
Yeah. Especially considering the fact that it's, the first year is the highest transitional, right? That's kind of why I'm thinking this, and the last year is the lowest, so if you want to build it up, it's really towards the end that you'd want to use it.
I think that makes sense.
Yeah,
It wasn't gonna hurt anything.
I agree, So, Nicole, did that make sense to you?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think ultimately, you know, what's important is just some degree of flexibility on a year-to-year basis. And I think some sort of rolling system or system of carryover will just allow for a little bit more of a glide path as opposed to a cliff drop, so to say. So I mean, whether that looks like 2-3 years carryover, getting it up front, I think any degree of that would be helpful.
Yeah, so I'll write that in a way that allows us that any transitional that's not utilized in the 5 years, within those 5 years, can be, will carry over, and all of it will expire at the end of those 5-year periods. Okay, but you have to earn it every year. So like I said, in the first year, what is it, 1.63, and then it drops down from there. But any of that, as you earn it, you don't use it. I know if there's an extremely wet year on the last year, and you have a bunch left over, we can take it to the board and have that conversation at that time.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. I know these are difficult numbers, and I know it has real life impacts on all of you, so we are trying to accommodate that as much as we can. Okay, let's keep, yeah. All right, so exceeding transitional pumping. So now you have used up your native allocation, you've used up your tier 1 transitional, then we get into the tier 2 civil penalties, and those penalties you will see are the same as the existing program. Okay, the reason I highlighted the other stuff there is because I removed that from the document. We were going to have all kinds, or originally I had written it in a way that ceased pumping, but what we've, as Deanna rightly pointed out, all of that should be in the management plan, and that's where we've moved all of that discussion is to the management plan. The annual pumping limit, we did lower that a bit, and it went from 3.14 down to 3. We received some comments on that from some of the landowners, and I think we're going to go ahead and up that back up to the original 3.14 value.
3.4.
3.4. I'm sorry, 3.4. Sorry. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah. Must be hungrier than I thought. So 3.4. So your annual pumping limits will be 3.4. That's the maximum you can pump in any 1 year. That means native yield, tier 1 plus credits. Okay? So if you have more credits, they don't go away. We just are gonna limit pumping to 3.4 acre feet per acre.
Yeah, are we gonna leave the rate, the tier 1 rate at the same now, right
Yeah.
now?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
125.
Yes.
Okay,
Sorry, Amir, just a point of clarification. Does tier 2 factor into that 3 acre foot an acre, or is tier 2 anything over the 3 acre feet an acre?
any, tier 2 will kick in when you exceed native plus tier 1, okay? It does, the tier 2 does not factor in as a maximum. But the annual pumping limit is going to be 3.4. Hold on. It's because of any landowner credit. Are you saying that you can?
Yeah, at 3.4, tier 2 kicks in unless there's,
Yeah, above 3.4.
Yeah. so
Anything above, yeah,
anything above your
meter
allocation.
use above 3.4 on those parcels, you get $500.
Yes.
Just a point of further clarification, I think in the draft policy, and this is Stacy Ann Silva, it says that there's a loss of future year credits for pumping over the cap. If you're saying that the tier 2 penalty pricing kicks in over native yield plus transitional, does that mean that the loss of future credits also kicks in after that native yield plus transitional, or does the loss of future credits kick in after the 3.4?
It kicks in after the 3.4.
Okay, even if there's, an acre foot or so in there that is tier 2 pumping.
Oh, I see your question. Sorry, I see the question.
It's a tricky
Yeah.
one, so I want to make sure I'm clear.
Yeah.
Let's just think about that. Right, more clearly.
Yeah, right now I've written it if it exceeds 3.4, but it needs, or 3.0, but the question is, you've got, in that 3.4, you might have a foot of additional. Yeah, well, let me think about that a little bit to make sure that that's clear. So,
Okay.
just so everybody's clear that,
We're allocating less, you're only allocating 1.6
yeah, 1.6, yeah,
on that first year,
yeah.
so, yeah.
Yeah.
I see Stacy's point, we just have to be, everybody needs to be clear on what
Clear,
we're actually.
yeah. So just so everybody's following along, we're at section 5.5 of the document.
Am I correct in interpreting the conversation as that there's a need to clarify that tier 2 is inclusive of that 1-to-1 loss, or is that just the whole question needs to be clarified?
The whole question needs to be clarified.
I think the thought was if you exceed your allocation in any year, which would be the native plus the tier 1, if you exceed that in the year, no matter, notwithstanding land undeveloped credits, that you would have a 1-to-1 loss ratio,
Yeah.
and then,
So,
3.4 really wouldn't have a bearing on that. I don't know.
kind of trying to punish you only after you receive it.
If you're like a landowner without any landowner developed credits, can you use tier 2 to supplement up to that 3 acre foot an acre pumping cap?
Yeah, so Nicole, that's why I'm thinking, this is again me talking out loud. That's why I'm thinking that you can pump up to the 3.4. Of course, you'll pay tier 2 penalties, of course.
Right.
Once you exceed that pumping limit of 3.4, then you will start losing next year's transitional water allocation. It gives you a lot of room.
Because I'm not sure that that gets us to I mean, ultimately, we have to meet the reductions every year. And
Yeah.
we're gonna have to show to the state and to the sub-basin that we're meeting our reductions.
Yeah,
That, I mean, there would be, I think, unfortunately, people would just pump the $500 water if there wasn't that loss. Much as I don't like to say that, but that's the goal is to meet those reductions yearly.
give us, a little time to have this conversation, also get some more feedback from all of you on this call, and propose a new one via email out to you that will clarify this, draft.
Yeah.
And having said that, our next board meeting is May 1, which gives us one more meeting of this group before, and we
don't have an April?
yeah, there's no April board meeting.
Oh, okay.
So the reason for that, the reason I want to bring that up is I wanted, April 23rd, we want to nail this down.
Okay.
And we will get this out early, a revised one out early, and give you at least minimum of 2 weeks to review, but we really do need your guys' comments in that 2-week period. Okay, all very good comments, and thank you, by the way, for bringing those up.
So I have one more question.
Absolutely.
Mayor. I'm on the Tule Sub-Basin policy,
Yeah,
on the definitions, number 4.3.
4.3.
It says the native yield carryover will be retired after 5 years. Is that true with native yield or only the transitional water?
No, that's true with native yields, because we don't want to count sitting out there 30 years from now that have accumulated native yield for 20 years or 15 years. So, I mean, the native yield comes off first. Anybody who's farming is going to be not there.
Right,
Anyway.
it's the first
Yeah,
bullet point that comes out of your account.
right.
Okay, that makes sense.
But yeah, we have in this first 5 year, we have.
Valid irrigated ground, you can, you can push that over to your still irrigated parcel.
Right, yes.
Roll that over, okay.
So Jay, let's say in the event that the last year, year 5, is this incredibly wet year again, right? We have 23 all over again. We'll revisit it then.
Well, no, it wouldn't matter because this was still a rolling basis, so it's not gonna end at the end of the 5 years. So if it's a wet year in.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, the
It's
first year
rolling.
would come off. You're right. It's a rolling basis, yeah.
Let's use an extreme example. Say a guy's 100% fallow,
Yeah,
and he accumulates his native yield
yeah.
for 10 years.
That's
Can he market that, or does
That's what we don't,
it has to be marketed accordingly within a 5-year period?
It has to market within the 5 years.
Okay.
We literally don't, and we see that with some accounts,
Yeah.
where we're just, we don't want water sitting off to the side, native yield that should be used by you guys, and you guys are paying these higher fees, right?
Okay.
That's what we're trying to avoid, is just this water parked off on the side. We want to try to get as much of that water into the market as we can.
On that note, Amer, it sounds like the credits disappear after 5 years from the landowner account. Does that mean that they go into some GSA managed account where then the GSA can determine based on water levels and the minimum thresholds whether or not those credits still exist in the aquifer, or are they just disappearing from the market after the 5 years is up altogether? As in, they're not held by a landowner, they're not held by the GSA.
Yeah, they're gonna disappear, and quite frankly, the transitional tier 2 pumping is probably taking care of some of that already in reality, right? So they are gonna disappear, so we wanna encourage people, because if they're gonna roll off, we wanna encourage them to get them into the market sooner than later.
On the positive side, every 5 years at minimum, we're gonna look at water levels and what's happening.
Right.
If water levels stabilize and there seems to be more flexibility in the native yield, I think the subbasin as a whole will probably look at that, but we've got a long ways to go to get to any sort of stability in water levels in the Tule subbasin.
That's the train of thought I was following, Deanna, so I appreciate your clarity and input.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? I'm sorry, I can't see anybody online, so if you do have a question, just go ahead and jump on. Okay, let's see. Aquifer allocations, oh, that's where we were. We're not allocating by aquifer. We don't feel like we have that data and that ability just yet. And certainly the Tule Subbasin does not do that. So we're not doing it within the Tule, so you can pump up to the limits in either aquifer or combined, depending on which wells you're pumping.
Unless the subsidence management.
Yeah,
plan
well, that's the
takes it.
next thing, hold on, that's literally the next bullet item.
Hold that thought.
Yeah, and then if we have impacts, then we implement our management plans, as Deanna just said. So if you're pumping from the lower and we start to see impacts, then those management, the subsidence management plan kicks in.
Is that the next slide?
That's there's almost.
That's the next one.
Yeah, so, Tulare Lake, Deanna's been talking to me a lot about, what are we gonna do for Tulare Lake? So, the rules for Tulare Lake are gonna be similar to Tule. The big difference is going to be on the native yield. The native yield for Tulare Lake is going to be 0.66 acre-feet per acre. That is the value that the Tulare Lake folks have been working off of. Some of the existing GSAs are already using that in South Fork and the discussions in Mid-Kings. El Rico is using a flat value, so they don't really do native or transitional, they just use a flat pumping number. Of which is, by the way, 2 acre-feet to start with, and it's reducing down next year to 1.5, or next year in 26. So then the question came up as to transitional water. So this was a tricky one in Tulare Lake, and this is a little bit of the sausage being made, but the discussion that Deanna and I had was there's not that much pumping in Tulare Lake. We also don't see a lot of impacts in that portion of Tulare Lake because obviously there's not that much pumping, there's not that much usable water, and certainly not in the upper aquifer. So we went back and forth, and what I'm proposing back to her right now is we start at 2 acre-feet transitional pumping, and it reduces down to 0 over between now and 2040.
The 2 plus 0.66.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's what we're proposing for Tulare Lake. I realize that the 2 is higher than the 1.6 that we're starting, this, and the ramp down is at a slower rate too, because we're doing a straight line down. The modeling, none of that is done just yet, the revised model for Tulare Lake. So we're using this as a starting number and a value to get us going. But again, we're not trying to, I want to be clear about this, we're not trying to encourage more pumping in Tulare Lake, but we also don't see the impacts on the Tulare Lake side that we see in the Tule side. So I do have a draft of the document that I literally just sent to Deanna less than an hour ago, so she hasn't had a chance to share that with anybody, but we will also be making that available to everybody probably within the next week, if not sooner.
Yeah, basically, it's the same document with a different attachment.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
The attachment for Tulare Lake will have Tulare Lake's numbers, and the attachment for Tule will have Tule's.
But the rules of rollovers and all those things will be exactly
All the rules
the
will be
same.
exactly the same.
Yeah. Okay, now we get to Jay's question, the subsidence management plan. Before I start on the subsidence management plan, does anyone on the call, and again, I'm sorry, I cannot see if you have your hands up. I don't know if you can see.
Nobody's raised their hand.
Okay. Just want to make sure nobody has had any questions before we move on. Subsidence management plan. Okay. Again, Purpose of the subsidence management plan, create some enforceable actions and avoid hitting our minimum thresholds, minimize subsidence. Okay? We want to do that. We want it, the minimize subsidence goes, is literally what, you know, is written into the GSP. This is if we start to see impacts. One of the big changes is this is very closely coordinated now with Lower Tule and the fixed-leaf policy, as Deanna already mentioned. The state response back to them was, this is very good. They liked the Lower Tule policy. They liked the fact that it was aggressive. Their hesitancy on it was, are you actually going to be able to implement this? And Eric Lemus is certain that that is what drove their issue about the implementation criteria. So.
Yeah, no, they signed some, they think the policy that Pixley and Laura Tully have set and adopted and are implementing is good. They just want time to see if it's actual implementation happens, I think, or, you know, how that actually translates into action. So
yeah.
If they're able to implement the policy they set forth, I think the state will eventually, set them out of probation. But beginning with probation, we're in probation as an entire subbasin, and I think that that's going to remain how it is, and there are definitely some issues still in the Tule subbasin that are not, that haven't been coordinated, so.
And it's primarily about subsidence.
Primarily.
Yeah. I will say that, and some of you have heard me talk about this before, there's supposed to be a subsidence best management practices document coming out from DWR. They have promised that now for going on close to 2 years. The last thing that I heard was that won't be released until at least June. So last few times we heard it was going to come out first quarter. Obviously, we're at the end of first quarter. That hasn't happened. Now what we're hearing is June. The second thing that we're hearing is that it probably won't have any surprises, and a lot of what's in there is stuff that is things that the GSAs are already doing. Again, I don't know what the document has in it. No one has seen a draft of it. At least as far as we know, it's not publicly available. And when it does become publicly available, it will be a draft. There will be time to comment on it. They'll usually go through at least 1 to 2 rounds of that. There will be places for it to comment to the state board as well, and at the hearings. And so there is opportunities. But I don't think it's going to be some major.
Mayor, you and the others in the Kuya Tule like know more about what's going on and how to treat it than the state board.
Yes.
Yes.
Department.
Yes.
Let's be real,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I don't know if they're really, like you said, they're going to offer anything to us. We're having to
Right.
wade through this.
No.
We're going to have to develop the policies all on our own out here.
Right.
Kuya Tule.
This is really for those that aren't in
It's a
probation.
devastating issue for all of us to
Right.
face.
Yeah.
So I think the state really would have a lot of hubris to come in here and tell us how to do this.
That's never stopped them.
No, but I think they need to take a page and let the locals really deal with it.
Yeah.
It's the most devastating thing we're going to have to face. Is 500,000-acre area. But,
Right.
So one thing that I do want to point out, we've been talking about this implementation and potentially having to stay in probation. The state staff, at least, still views probation as local control because they have not officially stepped in to take over as the interim plan. They don't view it as direct state intervention, and so they still view as, hey, you guys are in charge, you guys are implementing, and you're controlling what happens on the implementation. So just FYI, just to make sure that everybody's clear on that distinction as well, and on local control.
And they've been fairly clear. I mean, this subsidence management plan is aggressive, but they've been fairly clear that if we don't have an actionable plan, if we don't have something with actions tied to it,
Right.
that they are going to provide us with an interim plan. I don't know when that would happen. I mean, there's not a lot of clarity around that. But, you know, I still believe that's what we're trying to avoid, because state managed wells are not really what we would want to see, and we would have a loss of local control at that point, so. But that's, you know, the stick with the state is, you know, show us the action, or we're going to provide that for you.
Okay. So,
Deanna and Amir, I have one quick question. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Okay.
Would we, under the scenario you just pointed out, where the state still has us under probation, like quasi jurisdiction over us, I presume we still continue to pay the volumetric and well fees annually, correct?
So that's an interesting question, Sebastian. The state board members, from what I understand, are still indicating to Pixley and Laura Tooley that this plan looks pretty good, and they have set summer to go back before state board members to ask to be released from paying the fees. And they feel fairly confident that that's going to happen. Whether it will or not, I don't know yet, but they feel like their indication from, not staff, but from board members is, this looks good, and we'll likely release you from the fees. So I think that provides us an opportunity if we pass. I mean, this is basically the same plan. It's not, it doesn't deviate from theirs very much. So, you know, I think that does give an opportunity for us to go before them and ask for the same release from fees. Whether that will happen or not, I don't know, but there is an opportunity there.
Okay, great. Thank you.
okay. Let's jump into this. The high-risk areas. So this is what happens in the high-risk areas to identify issues before any groundwater reductions or other things kick into place. So what we have said is those high-risk areas will be considered when we hit 40% of the MT. And in that point, we're going to make sure that everybody is complying with the well registration and metering policies. Now, they're supposed to already, but we're going to go through every single well. And if we're at, you know, even if we're at 80% or 90%, there might still be a few wells out there that have not complied. So we're going to force them to comply and with the metering policy as well. Everyone's going to be reporting on a monthly basis. So we're going to make sure that that's occurring. And then the GSA is going to look at possible management actions that they can do to help that area. What can we do as a GSA to help that area out so that they don't hit any of the thresholds where things start to become more limiting. Next slide. And then now, if we do start to hit some of these other values, then we will, of course, kick in our corrective subsidence management plans. These look just like very much to what Thule has. What Lower Thule has. So no pumping of Tier 1 transitional allocation in the lower aquifer. No pumping of recharge credits in the lower aquifer. And no transfer of any credits into the area. And no new wells in the lower aquifer. That's at the 50%. At 75%, there's no pumping from lower aquifer wells that are contributing to subsidence. So not even if you're contributing to the subsidence, the native yield also goes away. So no pumping in the lower aquifer from wells contributing to the subsidence. But you can continue to pump your allocations from the upper aquifer. And at 100% of the MT in that area, there's no pumping from any of the wells in the upper or lower contributing to subsidence. Now, let's, I'm sorry, then what's the next slide after this? Here we go. Perfect. So, this is the map that was emailed out as part of the package that Stacy sent out, because she's totally organized and got to it before I asked her to even, which is awesome. Thank you, Stacy.
I asked you.
Well, it's even better. So, this is the draft map. Here's the important things. You see the zero, you see the green is the 0 to 39%, means no trigger, there's nothing happening. High risk areas are between 40 and 49%. Those are in the yellow. And then above 50% to 74% obviously is blue, and then above that we start getting to the orange and red. Okay? You will see that much of the north is in the green. We do have zone 8 that is now officially into the yellow. The other thing that you will note in here, for example, zones 14, 15, 9, 10, 11, 12, those are all values have not changed. Those were matched up with our neighbors. So our number, for example, in zone 11 is the same as Pixley's. Our number in zone 14 is the same as Alpha. The MT that is listed there, we have changed in the zones that move away from our neighbors to the north. And you can see that in some cases, those MTs have been increased from roughly 4, 4.8, things like that, to 5. And then as we move easterly towards the Frank Kern Canal, where we do need to see subsidence reduced down to 0, to a minimal number there, our numbers also decrease from 4.5 to 4. The obvious changes that you will see are in zones 20, 27, in those areas 34. Those have been increased because these are more in line with the October values that were presented by the Subbasins consultants, and before the Delano Early Mart made the insistence that everything had to be 0 at their boundary. We think these are more in line with what we need to do and are more realistic as to the values that we can achieve before 2040. Some of the zones are already into blue. You can see that very clearly. They're just starting to inch its way. Zone 26 obviously has the highest amount of science relative to its MT. The subsidence values that you see on this figure are between 2020 and October of 2024, which is the latest data that we have, although we are soon to expect to get new data here, and we will update this map, and it'll be on the website, and we'll update it every quarter. Let me see, what else do I want to talk about this map? Well, let me open it up for questions.
So I got some comments. Obviously, the guys that are in the 50s are there because the MT is the lowest number.
Yes.
Some of those areas have less subsidence than guys that are less than, let's pick on zone 5. They're subsided 2.69 feet, and they're under 40% because they got almost a 7. So, Delano's going to tell us they want us at 0, and again, you can't have a coordination agreement unless everybody shows their numbers.
Yes.
And I'm understanding that they don't want to show their numbers. subsidence. Do you have subsidence
Oh, no.
numbers in Delano?
Yeah, we have
Yeah.
insert data.
Yeah.
we
I've
have
never
insert-
seen that map. So are they similar to us, or are they worse, better?
No, they're better. It's this map right
Yeah.
here that we showed earlier.
But do you have it in the patchwork?
No, they don't do a patchwork.
They won't be doing
Like
a
this.
patchwork.
Yeah, they won't do a patchwork. We just know what their total subsidence is yearly and then cumulative, of course.
So to put all these rules on in the enforcement plan, I'm kind of reading through the management plan,
Uh-huh.
and we're making these rules based on words like appear, may, maybe. And, I'm looking at, 1.5.
Yeah,
Higher rates of subsidence appear to occur. I mean, you're kind of giving us a death sentence for something that's not absolute. I mean, we're getting the cuffs on and going to trial. It's not a unanimous vote to go to jail. It's appear. It's may. And, these wells were drilled, whatever, 10, 15, 20 years ago. The majority of them are perfed in the upper aquifer and the lower. And to say that no more lower aquifer, again, the landowners gotta go spend more money for what? To get in a bigger hole, to die? So I disagree with, and it's in your other policy, that it's not limited to the upper or lower aquifer, but in this one it is. Why would we limit ourselves in this policy to the aquifers? I can agree to the monitoring of it, just it's less water, but I do not agree with the aquifer thing. I don't think that's verified or proven with those kind of words, and they're in your document.
yeah. So,
And I've said it before, and I'm speaking for myself here.
sure.
We kind of got to get this thing the maximum years, be able to make a little bit of money to pay people that we owe money to. And in reality, it's almost like eminent domain. We bought this property with the right to pump water and it had a certain value. It's getting taken away. I mean, I've sold the road to the county before. They come in and say, here's your appraisal. They usually bump it, make it more than fair. People agree and you go down the road. To me, the state's doing the same thing with taking the water. They're taking your value. It's eminent domain on your rights, and they ought to compensate you for it. I mean, we're just kind of rolling over here, and I know all these rules, and we got to kind of do it, but, when they talk about land fallowing programs and this and that from the county, I'm okay with that if they fund it and give you a value for it, not a value based on no water, a value where you purchased it. It's on your deed, pump water, beneficial use. And, I'm proud of you guys for stepping up and bucking the other GSAs, right?
We did not have the best
I wish I
time.
could play for you the recording of the meeting yesterday.
It wasn't
We're
pretty.
the redheaded stepchild for sure.
Some of these thoughts going into the practical side of the landowner to try to accomplish, and I think we all got the same goals. Kind of get out from under the debt. You made 20-year plans,
Right.
all that kind of stuff. We got to be very, very flexible without spending more money to comply, because then it gets worse.
Yeah, so Jay, I think everyone agrees with everything you said. There's nothing you said is incorrect. I think the reality is, though, that the subsidence is happening, and it didn't, obviously we try to soften some things up that gives us, some language in here, but the subsidence is happening. We've certainly have seen that, on both the local the yearly maps and the cumulative shares. Your point is, can you point at wells and say, this is why, the only reason that subsidence is happening? And that's why we're trying to, do as much flexibility as we can, and in areas where we do see the deep pumping below the aquifer or the clay. And I want to be clear, it's not just the Corcoran clay, because certainly the Corcoran clay doesn't exist on the east side, and the Bryant Kern Canal, other local geology and issues are affecting the Bryant Kern Canal. But in our area, and certainly to the west of us, we are seeing the subsidence from the pumping below the clay. Now, is all of it due to only the pumping below the clay? Right. That's why, some of this is a little bit softer language, right? Or is in consultant speak, it's what we call our weasel words, the maze of the world, right?
Appears.
Yeah, appears, right?
So I want to use them
Yeah.
to my advantage as well.
That's right.
Right? I mean,
That's right. Now, I think your second, oh, go ahead, Jenny, you were gonna.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Okay.
Sorry.
I think your second concern, though, is there are parts of the subbasin that have, almost 7 feet,
sure.
at zone 5 versus 4 feet in, zone 27, or actually zone 20, which, is in blue, right? And we do know, the reality is, the Bryant Kern Canal is one of the state's biggest concerns in the Tule subbasin, if not their single biggest concern in the Tule subbasin. The Corcoran area is obviously a concern as well. But having said that, we do know that we want to continue to reduce subsidence as we move eastwards towards the canal.
Agreed.
And the maps that I've shown that show the cumulative, there are areas east of us that have some pretty high subsidence still in those maps. We did try very hard, and by the way, just, the subbasin pushed back very hard on these numbers. They did not, as Deanna mentioned jokingly yesterday, that was not the most fun I've ever had in a GSA meeting. We got derated several times in that meeting, but we feel strongly that we can defend these values.
These on this map?
Yeah.
So I thought we were gonna try to bump them a little more than that, like to 5.
Well, yesterday, the subbasin was talking about 2 feet being too much on the border. So,
Subbasin meaning one person or more than one person?
that was from the consultants to, I think what we have to understand by this map right now, what we did, we have made the subbasins MTs for subsidence uncoordinated. The entire subbasin is now uncoordinated on MTs. If from the state's point of view, if you look at it as a whole. Now, who made it uncoordinated? I would go back and I'd suggest that Delano Erlenmeyer by going to a 0, which is completely not something that can be achieved, is what made us uncoordinated. But that wasn't the feeling in the room yesterday, so.
Are there higher MTs to the east than 4?
No.
No.
None of them are higher going east.
I wouldn't wanna say none, but not, Delano Erlenmeyer is 0, so it's directly to the east of you at 0, and then I'm not certain, but,
Well,
maybe
how can they have
there's
it 0 if they're subsiding?
well, they suggest that the subsidence is, due to outside forces and nothing that they're doing.
Suggesting.
Well, they state it very strong.
They're, I don't know, use the word allegation, maybe that's a little too strong, but their stance is that all of the subsidence that's occurring in Delano Erlenmeyer is due to,
That's not their deal.
it's something elsewhere, yeah.
No fault.
No fault, yeah. Yeah, no fault of theirs. So I think, so as I said, zone 13 does match up with what, Pixley has directly north of us. I don't have Pixie's map in front of me, Jay, so I don't know.
Yeah, they put one out, I was,
It's
I
on
can't
the,
pull it up on my phone, but they did send one out to their growers. I mean, we're working through that.
This one,
Is that it right there? Yeah, that's it right
Yeah.
there. So, yeah, you can,
pretty small,
so that's,
if they're trying to avoid the information, can't see it,
looking at these right here, Jay.
right?
That's the one that would be, what are those MTs in Pixley?
3 2s, 3 7, 4 1,
Okay.
5 4.
That's the one directly north of Delano.
Yeah.
Pixley.
yeah,
5 2, 6 0, 5 6. And those are the ones further out to 43, the higher ones.
Yeah.
yeah. The higher ones are heading west, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what we have too, Jay. Our westerly are higher, and then we reduce from 5 to 4, going moving to the east.
Yep. Well, that's my opinion, obviously. But what I'd really like to push back on is the limit from the different aquifers, because I think that's the way those wells are set, a lot of them, and I don't think it's proven yet. I think we ought to monitor. I think those policies ought to be the same as the guidance policies and monitor for another 5 years.
I think there's room for that, but what I'd say is, if we weren't to limit the lower aquifer pumping, I believe you're gonna hit the MT quicker. So, I mean, it's kind of, which would you prefer? So we wanted to encourage less pumping in lower aquifer, hopefully that extended the period for farming.
What is our MTs out there on the eastern side of Tri-County? What is our MT groundwater level?
On the eastern side?
Out here, what is
Oh,
our?
for groundwater level?
Yeah, groundwater level.
I do not have that.
Delano-
I know you just showed us the levels, but I don't remember.
Delano set their MTs for water levels higher than us.
So how do we track what our current ones that you just showed us on the annual report?
As far as MTs are,
Yeah.
for our MTs?
For our MT?
Yeah, we're okay as far as our MTs are concerned for 23, 24.
Okay.
There is one Angela well that is below its MT.
And we don't really have,
So you need
again, the
Delano.
monitoring sites in the southeast area are
Right.
limited. We need
Yeah.
additional monitoring sites.
Yeah. But Jason, I don't know if I have much to ask you, what Jason.
No,
I put a few comments in the letter to you.
Yeah, no one is
Details
disagreeing.
of this
I
stuff.
think that, that's up for discussion. The idea between limiting the lower aquifer was to push people to the upper aquifer and hopefully extend, because I want to say the hydrogeologists are they all fairly agree that it's the lower aquifer that's creating the majority of subsidence. So it's really an issue of we extend.
But,
I don't know.
yeah,
But is it worth
So would
the
it
money?
be,
Is it worth the money? I see your point completely.
And maybe it's an individual landowner's decision then. If you are doing the deep and you get there faster, that's your decision.
Regardless, there has to be a trigger that says we're gonna do an investigation, and if the investigation
Right.
says your deep pumping is causing the subsidence, and maybe your landowners around you move to the upper aquifer and they're not causing such subsidence, there would have to be something that kicks in there. You can't have one landowner at 2,000 feet below, which is extreme, but 1,400 feet below, pumping the heck out of it, and then the neighbors are moving to the upper aquifer and not doing that. There has to be some,
But, Dina, I don't want to speak for Jay on his place right here, but I know I had some wells, I've just drilled some wells up in the Quia area, over the last years. We just did one a year ago, and we don't drill to the shallow anymore. We drill past that, and it's a composite, both shallow and
you should have known better.
Because all the shallow wells
joke
go
around.
away, right? Because they fall off during multi-year drought.
Yeah.
So I'm not the only one who's done that. Jay's done it, everyone else has done it.
Yeah.
And these wells are not cheap. The one we drilled was $375,000 to do that, right? And that's a 700-foot well, but that's perfect below the clay.
Right.
There on the freeway, if I, it's probably 300 feet, 100 feet. So what I'm getting at is that we're looking at landowners, I'll probably have to face this at some point up there, but we're looking at how do you go about using that asset? You know, that's why I put in there, have we looked at even how would you, if you even consider modifying a well, what that would take? You know, I put that out there, it's like, hey, has anyone even looked at that? Because we sort of want to throw money after something to seal off a well that's producing 2,800 gallons a minute from, you know, maybe 400 feet down to 800 or 900 feet. And all of a sudden you say, well, is it is it the clay at 450 and you got to seal that off below that? What does that take? Is it, I don't know if I haven't talked to, I'm not a well person, so I don't know what that would take.
I think there's two questions, you know, as landowners, there's two big questions for this committee. One, do we want to commit to a subsidence management plan? Do we think it's necessary? Right? Do we want to do it? We know the state has given Fixing Lower Chili feedback, said, yes, we like that plan. And yes, we think that you can exit out of the fees and we're going to work with you with this type of plan. And two, can we modify this plan in a way that's helpful and not lose what it's meant to accomplish? So those are really, in my mind, the two questions. And, you know, the board's going to consider something. I don't know if they'll adopt it or not. But, you know, as a group, as stakeholders, do you want that? Do you want to manage for subsidence in this way? I mean, there is a route that says our allocation program is enough, and that's all we're going to enforce. But I think that leaves the door open for the state to say, your neighbors have a subsidence management plan, we like it very much, and likely they're going to enforce this upon us anyway. So can we put something in this plan that gives it some flexibility and still maintain what we're trying to accomplish overall? The question.
As Aaron districts know, have they finished, and I know they've notified, I think, Jay, you guys, everybody's been notified, but have they gone through and finished their reports or something like that? What do they call these? Same thing, right?
Well, were they do like a risk management assessment of the?
No, I mean, yes, I mean, if they, it's correct, it's a management order, have they actually gone through that investigation?
I don't think they've accomplished an investigation.
They've notified the high risk zone, so everybody there in those districts have been notified. I just don't know if they've triggered that
I don't know.
study.
I can answer that question if it's helpful.
Yeah, Steve, that'd be great.
They have not triggered any of the management actions yet. They've designated every zone as high risk, and they have their technical consultant right now working on an assessment of the technical assessment of the area as it relates to subsidence, and then any management actions would come after that assessment.
Okay. Everybody's studying still.
So maybe that's the way to word it, is we do have a plan, but it's open-ended based on more information. It's not in concrete, it's up here and maybe in a chance.
The board
I mean, that's the way they're enforcing it.
Right.
We'll spin it around on them.
But it's the key thing, I think, when safety is, I mean, the key is gonna be this study.
The key is,
That's gonna be the.
who's contributing.
The verdict that will be given to that zone.
Yes.
Will be that study right here.
Yes.
And it's not equal to everybody in the zone.
Yeah.
If you're not contributing to the subsidence, or you're contributing a minor amount and others are contributing more, then the verdict is not the same.
But the study will be based on that zone, the 2,400 acres.
Yeah.
And every well that
Yeah.
you will map, and then you'll have to figure out how deep that well is and what zone it's coming from. That will be part of the study.
Yeah.
And then that study, the result of that study, which should be done by US Centec or outside party, who's gonna be doing the actual study?
We'll probably do the studies, because we represent the GSA.
Right.
If you know, other people who can do, individuals are certainly, are welcome to do that, but we would oversee the study or do the study ourselves depending on what we need to do.
And then that comes back to the board, the results, they
Yeah.
come back to the board, and the board
Yeah.
will make final action
Yeah.
on the policy as this there. Okay, quiet.
Yeah. So-
Anybody on the line have one thing?
I was just gonna say that, is there anybody who's on the call that would like to also, jump in on this issue and give some thoughts on the policy itself or just the approach?
Lots of people.
Yeah, I noticed that too. Where we go.
Quiet.
It's quiet.
What's our time frame for written comments again? Before the next, so this will go, we'll revise the allocation policy for what we talked about today.
Yes,
That will go out again. We'll look at this again, see
Yes.
if there's any changes we can make in light of comments today. That will go out again, and then we'll have a comment period,
Well, if you
and
want 2 weeks prior to your next meeting, it has to go out no later than the 9th.
the 9th of
Yeah.
April, okay?
that, we can do that.
And, we'll have one more
More about that.
discussion, and then, put it before the board and see what the board thinks at that point.
Yeah.
You know, it's tough policy, guys.
No, I know, these are tough decisions.
These minimum thresholds are
Yeah.
very difficult, and, you know, we could see the subsidence trend line, and we're definitely going towards those minimum thresholds, and really it's just about how do we turn that.
Yeah, can I ask, maybe you and Amir both, I know there was a meeting with, I think Aaron was there, the Kauai, and Clear Lake. Just speak to that real quick, what was that about?
It's an
About subsidence.
effort to coordinate. I wasn't on the last one, I was
Oh,
on the
that's
first
right.
one.
Yeah.
What are they calling that? They calling that
The regional,
regional, okay.
yeah.
Subsidence.
So, see, you know, everyone talked about what they were doing, what their values were. I made a point to talk about the fact that it's not just about coordination, because there was too much talk about just coordinating what happens at the boundary,
Right.
rather than what are the steps that we're actually taking to minimize subsidence, right? And what became obvious was, you know, they still want to focus in on the boundary, coordination issues. And so, they were gonna start getting everybody's values and looking at what's happening at each of the boundaries. And then secondly, though, they did wanna start gathering all the management actions that people are taking in addressing, the subsidence concern. Because I understand your point, Jay, trust me, I, you know, agree, I'm in 100% agreement with you, but I do think that implementation matters to the state and eventually getting us, approved plans and out of probation, but not just for that reason, because if you can't live with it, what's the point, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
So state coordination, is it between the GSAs or the subbases?
between the subbasins for that regional
But
planning.
that board applies with the GSAs too, right?
Yes, yes.
We have to sign a coordination agreement with coordinated methodologies.
Yeah.
Right now, this right here is a big,
Yeah, but you mentioned that one manager has, or the district has put ability to, we can't coordinate with zero on starting at 20. Doesn't work for us.
Right.
So,
But we are taking concrete, I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, major concern from the subbasin yesterday is that we stepped away from the subsidence study that would impose
that was the, well,
the
put that,
EMTs
okay.
on that area.
got it.
And so, you know, their question back to us was, and how are we gonna coordinate them? We're not gonna participate. Which is a fair question, it's a fair question, and I don't think I had a acceptable answer yesterday.
We're working on it.
No, we said, look, we said we've established these based on previous values that the consultant for the subbasin gave for subsidence, that these values here said that there weren't going, in fact, they could have been a little bit higher and still not show impacts against the old. We gave them some leeway for reductions towards the east, and therefore that number is 4 instead of 5, right? But we also committed to those allocation programs, which means we are looking at reducing pumping every year. That's the big issue, right?
Yes.
Are you taking concrete steps? Because these are just numbers on a piece of paper. Are you taking concrete steps? And that allocation plan that we just talked about commits us to taking concrete steps to reduce groundwater pumping. That's a big step. That's the
meat and potatoes.
That's the meat and
We're
potatoes.
pumping less water.
Yeah.
All this is a little bit of peer maybe,
Yeah,
and who's responsible.
Yeah.
right.
Big step is there's less water coming out of the ground.
There's less water coming out of the ground. And that level of commitment that we're making is not the same level that everyone else is committed to. We're showing an actual reduction in year-to-year groundwater pumping. That's a huge step, and I couldn't get that across to everyone in the call yesterday, let's just put it that way.
And back to my previous point, because we're such a small percentage farmed in tri-counties,
Yeah,
I think we're doing double the effect because we're half as much farmed on a gross acre. That's why I asked you the gross
yeah,
acres.
right.
We're pumping currently half as much water today as I think some of the other people, because they're so highly percent farmed.
Yes.
So maybe that's gotta be the yardstick.
You know, the writing's on the wall. If you look at the listings right now out here in Tri-County, look at the listings, right? The prices they're talking about. There's thousands of acres that potentially, we're going the right direction, painfully. So I think I would say, I think we just need as much flexibility in this. Painful ratchet down to 0.22, which will, at the end of the day, solve. In other words, we've spent decades getting to this problem, getting to this issue. We recognize it's a problem. It's going to take time to unwind investments that have been made. We can't snap our fingers and make it all better. I can't make it better for our illustrious district to the east of us, by the way. I just can't. But it's coming. This area and even Pixie will look a lot different in the next decade.
Unfortunately.
Yes, unfortunately. That's true.
Not a great job right now, Dave.
I feel for you guys, and like I said, I'm proud of you, right?
Yeah.
And I wanna make sure we're doing it on exact science and not
Right.
speculation. And I know you gotta move forward with some speculation. But to your point, Amir, just the reduction,
Yeah. That's
put all these other linchpins in there to choke you to death sooner. That's my biggest problem.
I do think the state's gonna need a plan that has some enforceable actions, and whether we, change those actions, around a little bit, maybe that's what we can look at and try to see if some of that might,
And a little more flexibility
yeah,
in some of the triggers.
Yeah,
yeah,
that's probably the take home.
yeah.
Okay.
That way we can, I'm not, at the end of the day, we still want to stop the subsidence by 2040,
Yes.
but, as Steve said, it doesn't have to happen tomorrow. That's what we're trying to avoid.
It's a fine line, I recognize. You guys, it's a difficult time. I mean, and the department, I think State Water Board too, recognizes this is not easy. The implementation stage of what we're doing, and here trying to get a plan approved, this is not.
So,
You guys, I don't know, I gotta leave it.
yeah, let me,
4 minutes.
let me wrap
Sorry,
up.
I'll be quiet.
Let me may wrap up the meeting,
Exactly
a
why we
couple
have
of,
these meetings.
yeah, a couple of important dates. Our next advisory committee meeting is on April 23rd at 10 a.m. We'd all love to see you in person if you can make it down to Corcoran. Don't start driving to Lemoore for your other meeting this afternoon and the first thing in the morning. And then our board meeting is May 1st at 1 p.m. The other thing I want to mention real quick is in that meeting with the State Water Board staff, they did mention that there would be an informational only item on the April State Water Board hearing. It's about 30 minutes, and they said, of staff presentation. I think the board has indicated, at least this is what the staff said, that the board asked for some updates. So I would encourage you, if you have the time, I'll get everybody. I don't know, the State Board hearing started, or not hearing, but meeting started at 9, and you always hope that they're going to get to whatever agenda item you are at some point that you're still available. But depending on where that agenda item is, I'll try to get that notice out to all of you so that if you're interested, you can either attend in person, and we would encourage anyone to comment. You can also comment via online as well. They do take comments at the State Board meetings online as well. But you do have to fill out forms, and there's rules and things like that. But I would encourage you all to comment. All right, I think that wraps it up. We'll get back to everybody with the revised documents, and we will see you all on the 23rd. Thank you, everybody.